I volunteer with the Red Cross. Oftentimes I go to other companies all over the area. This one time I went to what was Progress Energy. It was in Samora, North Carolina, about 45 minutes away. I didn't think anything of it. I thought I was going to another administrative office until I started going down a long, windy, deserted road towards a huge cloud of smoke. Then I finally arrived at what seemed like the base of a volcano. I saw something like this. Chimney stacks flowing lots of clouds of black smoke into the air. I sat there transfixed for at least 5 minutes, taking in this surreal moment and realizing for the first time where my electricity comes from and exactly how it changes, how ultimately, how polluting it is to all of us. The sad truth about electricity is the greatest carbon polluter in the United States. 33% of all carbon emissions come from generating electricity. Compare that to transportation, the use of cars, trucks, and planes. The places that we think all of our carbon emissions come from only accounts for 28%. It makes you think very differently when you think about products like these, doesn't it? Well, why is that? To understand that, you have to understand how electricity is made. In basic terms, it's only made by spinning two magnets around a copper wire. How do we do that more efficiently? Well, the most efficient way of doing it is by using steam. As you can see this from this diagram here, you use a fuel source to heat the water. It heats the steam. The steam turns this turbine, which spins the generator, and thereby creating the electricity that we all know and love. And what is the most efficient fuel source? Well, the most commonly used is actually coal. Coal is the most used fuel source in the United States. It accounts for 49% of all electricity generated in the United States. However, it accounts for 83% of carbon emissions in the United States. It's also the most polluting fuel source in the United States. Take a look at this graph. As you can see, coal towers over every other fuel source. The next fuel source that's anywhere close to polluting only pollutes about 60% of what coal does. Furthermore, coal pollutes more than just carbon. These are all the other pollutants that we have that it brings out. Sulfur dioxide, which creates health issues in all of us and creates acid rain. Nitrogen oxide, which not only creates smog and ozone, but also creates health issues like lung disease and exacerbates asthma. Mercury, which creates heart disease and brain damage. Carbon monoxide and hydrochloroquine, which both damage the ozone level and also causes health issues for us all. Arsenic, which causes cancer. And everybody knows about lead, cadmium, and uranium, which are very poisonous to human beings. All of these not only go into the air supply, but they go into the earth and they go into the water supply, and thereby us. Thousands of metric tons are actually produced when we use coal electricity. So what's our solution? Well, I've spoken to other people, and I've researched EPA's website, and they have a specific number of suggestions. The first one would be to retire or update old power plants. Old power plants old power plants about 40 to 50 years old represent 73% of all carbon emissions made from electricity. If we retire these plants and replace them with something more efficient, it will reduce the amount of carbon that's produced every year. Furthermore, we can take the old plants that we have right now and refurbish them so they're more energy efficient, but we also can take out the byproduct. the carbon, the sulfur dioxide, the nitrogen oxide that normally goes into our water supply and our air supply. Take that out and use it in benign products like cement or stucco, thereby cleaning the air and keeping this carbon and this other pollution from getting into the air, our environment, and thereby us. The next solution is to switch our fuel sources to something that produces less. Natural gas produces 50% of carbon emissions than coal electricity would. The most obvious solution would be cleaner energy sources. Everybody knows about these: hydroelectricity, wind electricity, solar electricity, nuclear energy, as well as biomass. To be 100% honest, there is no energy source that is 100% carbon free. But if you compare just the numbers, it's amazing. Wind produces 10 grams of carbon for every kilowatt produced. Compare that with coal, which creates 1,050 grams of carbon for every kilowatt produced. That's 100 times less when you use wind as opposed to coal. By switching to these sources, we can reduce our dependency on coal and reduce the amount of carbon that goes into the air. But there's one more solution, and it all falls on us. Energy Star appliances. If we use Energy Star appliances, we can reduce the amount of electricity that we personally use, as well as reduce the amount of electricity that is used to produce the carbon that goes into the air. The amount of carbon, the amount of savings that has happened because people have changed over to Energy Star is the equivalent of shutting down 45 power plants. It saved over 195 million tons of carbon from going into the air and saved $20 billion in energy costs. By switching to something that has that label, we can save on how much electricity that we use, reduce the amount of electricity that needs to be produced, and reduce the amount of carbon emissions that goes into the air. In conclusion, this is what we need to do to reduce our carbon footprint with electricity. Refurbish or retire old power plants that produce all this carbon. Switch to energy sources that use less carbon. Use renewable energy sources like wind and solar that use less carbon, and use more energy efficient products. And if we do this, not only will we reduce our carbon footprint, but we'll reduce the amount of pollution that we all have to take in. And after we do that, we can all have a brighter day. We're now going to move on to a 2 to 3 minute question and answer section. To help